Hello and welcome to this special pre-budget discussion right here on Money Control. Now, the countdown to the Union Budget 2023 is in its final lap. We have exactly 2 days to go before Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present what is this government's last budget before the union elections this year. Considering it is the last budget before elections, there is a sense that this budget could essentially be a manifesto of the government's achievements in the last 4 5 years. We have to wait and see what we can expect sector wise. But what can the government really do to bolster the $227 billion technology sector in India? To take that discussion forward, we have three very special guests joining us on the show. Debjani Ghosh, the president of Nasscom, Keshav, Murugesh, the global CEO for WNS Global Services, as well as Romal Shetty, the CEO designate for Deloitte South Asia. As you can see, it's a power pack panel. Thank you all very much for joining us. Debjani, I'm going to let you have the first word. I went through the Nasscom pre-budget memorandum. It was almost, I think, 25 pages, long list of demands that spans the IT sector, services, startups, and so on. I'm sure you had a chance to talk to government officials in the run-up to the budget. What's the sense that you got? Is this a sector that they are focusing on at all? Considering this is the last budget before elections, is it going to be more of an Aam Aadmi budget? What's the sense that you got?
First of all, Chandra, always good to talk to you. And I have to say congratulations on your Davos coverage. It was absolutely brilliant. Loved it.
Thank you.
The sense I'm getting is it's about growth. The focus, the priority, the discussions are all about growth and acceleration of growth, especially in this kind of an environment where the entire world is very concerned with what's going to happen, whether there is going to be a recession or how big a recession. I think the tech sector in India, and all fingers crossed, I'm very worried about jinxing it, but all fingers crossed, the tech sector in India has been a poster child for resilient growth through the ups and downs that we have seen in the last few years. And I think this is one sector that is still very firmly poised on a growth trajectory. Now, how much and how fast is all up for debate, but what we do know is we are a growth sector, and the government completely gets that. So if you look at the Nasscom budget pre-memorandum, we actually haven't put it as asks because there are no new asks. What we have called out are suggestions that the government can leverage budget to bring about, which will significantly strengthen this foundation for growth for both startups as well as the larger industry. And the two areas we focused on is talent and ease of doing business for both. And frankly, what you will find in our submission to government are very well thought through suggestions in consultation with industry. I would call them the low hanging fruits, levers, which can easily be addressed and will have a huge impact in terms of our ability to grow faster. And the only other area we have separately called out is what, again, actually one big change that India can make. Again, it's a change. It's not a new ask. To get more investments, tech investments into India. So I'll stop there and we can go into details later.
Yeah, in fact, if I look at your memorandum, there was a significant weightage also for startups in terms of how you can make it easier for startups, for employees of startups in terms of ESOP payments, as well as investors of startups, and of course the IT sector ones that you mentioned. Keshav, an industry person I was speaking to said we have no new expectations. We are happy as long as there are pleasant surprises in the budget. What's your take?
So Chandra, again, I completely echo all that Debjani has said. And again, thank you for having me on this panel. So first and foremost, I will start by saying that this is one industry that has led from the front, right? And whether it's a budget just before an election or it is, whatever way you look at it, I think in an economy globally that is being seen as potentially going into a recession, uh, protecting a resilient business like ours, which can actually continue to grow faster, is, I think, going to be my key recommendation. So while I don't think we have any new asks, I think the fact that India has done so well, India has handled the COVID crisis so well, India has actually created new business models and created so much confidence in the minds of customers globally. I think what I would recommend is all the minor tweaks that are required to make it even better for India to grow faster in this environment is what I would be focused on from a budget point of view. And I would say, from a in a broad manner, I would say it is essentially for the government to appreciate that one can leverage IT as a tool for socio-economic, development for the country first and foremost. There can be minor tweaks to ensure that human resource development at an India level takes place faster to provide even better capacity, for the long term, like Debjani said. I think there can be minor changes that I'm sure that my panelist is going to talk about, which is in terms of ironing out some minor issues that are there in GST, the whole SEIS area, as well as potentially the foreign trade policy itself. And I think from an income tax point of view, again, there are minor changes that will be required, recognizing the fact that there's been a big change from 3 years ago to now, and to leverage this model to grow even faster. Why should we be 227 billion? We can be even bigger, right? So I think that is what I would say we can do.
Right. I think the government should be happy. I mean, this is one sector which is saying, we are happy with what we have. We just need very minor tweaks. We don't need any game-changing reforms or announcements. Romal, would you agree, that the sector is kind of well placed and the government simply needs to build on that momentum and bring about these tweaks that Debjani and Keshav spoke about in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of ironing out some of the issues around GST and taxes?
No, absolutely. I think both of them have covered that very well. And definitely, I think, technology, ITS is really the poster boy across the world. India is really the poster boy. So from my perspective, there are two things which I would really say. One is our own belief is that this is going to be, sort of the decade of digitization. In some sense, over $1 trillion is going to be spent on digitization per se. So therefore, how can India sort of really capture that market, I think is extremely critical. So it's not about, I think, in terms of us, but it's, as I think, both Debjani and Keshav said, that, how can we grow faster? Second bit is, can we look at certain aspects? So for example, whether it is on semiconductors, whether it's on, AI parts, for example, whether it's on embedded software, how do you build both the skilling and how do you allow, in terms of the ease of doing business? The third portion is really in terms of a number of state governments and central government sort of wooing investors. So can we get more of those investment? Because this is one place where we've got tremendous amount of human capital. So we've got to leverage it, and we've got to be sort of the drivers of, sort of the future, rather than more of, what we can do today. So in that sense, of that $1 trillion spend that is going to happen, how can India, for example, $10 trillion of spend that will happen in digitization, how can India really sort of have the major chunk? And India is very well equipped in many things, but if we can do skilling in some of the newer areas, do things like semiconductors, as I mentioned, just like we had oil security, can we have semiconductor security as well? Because that is going to become a critical part. And if the budget can do a few things to facilitate that, I think that would be really, really good for the country.
Interesting point on semiconductor capacity. In fact, I think that has been one of the major thrusts of the government in the last year with the PLI scheme and so on. Debjani, coming to some of the specific recommendations, at least the three key areas that I spotted in your pre-budget memorandum with respect to IT. One was around per diem allowance, one was around safe harbor rules, and I think the third was around transfer pricing agreements. For the benefit of our viewers, if you can take us through, the 2-3 critical things for the IT sector that, you're hopeful for as far as budget 2023 is concerned.
Chandra, can I start with startups?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Because that sector really, really has to be addressed. So, the ESOP ask, the
Yeah.
deferring the point of taxation on sale of ESOP to a wider pool of startups is not a new ask, right? Everyone's been asking that for the last 2 years or more. It has now become even more urgent to address it because talent is becoming a key competitive advantage for startups. If you have it, you can compete, especially globally. And if you do not have it, the chances are dim. And talent is getting extremely difficult for our startups to access. In fact, that's one of the biggest challenges being faced by startups. And we strongly believe that ESOPs can play a critical role in enabling startups not just get good talent, but retain good talent. So I think it's really time that the government takes a look at it. And one of the suggestions that Nasscom has made, that if there is serious concern about misuse, put some criteria like only available to employees of DPIIT registered startups, eligible ESOPs to be offered only to Indian residents and taxpayers. Terms of ESOP should be the same for all employees to whom these are offered. So, there's criteria. And worst case, if you're really worried about misuse, then have a phased approach where you start with a process that is designed to have like a deemed IMB certification for startups funded by regulated, accredited investors like AIF, government managed or owned funds, foreign portfolio investors, etc., and create a fast track IMB certification. But this has to be addressed. We can be creative about the solutions, but I think this is one. And the second one that we really have to get right is the harmonization of tax rates for resident investors on the unlisted share issued by DPIIT. This is affecting availability of domestic capital. And I'm sure you're well aware of it, Chandra, that while we talk about unicorns and all of that, a very small percentage of the overall startups actually get funds. And if you look at the segment that does not get funds, you find that a lot of them are actually working on India specific solutions in health, in agriculture, rural growth. And it's very difficult for them to attract the right kind of funds from international VCs. And this is why we have to increase domestic capital. And the harmonization of tax rates is going to be absolutely critical. There were a few other asks. I will not get into the details, but one thing I will call out because it sort of doesn't make sense. It's the MAT provisions, right? That you have for startups, where startups, like everyone else, as per the amendment that happened, has to now pay MAT, even if they claim exemption under Section 801 of IT Act, and that sort of doesn't make sense. So, one, either have a threshold, or two, if you don't want to have a threshold, at least bring down the rate from 18% to 9%. 9%, by the way, is what all units established in IFSC, the International Finance Service Center, has to pay. I think these are some of the key ones for startups. Chandra, do you want me to pause here, or do you want me to continue with industry?
No, let me actually just ask you a follow-up question, Debjani. I think MAT, in fact, was one of your key asks, that for startups, it needs to be brought down to 9%, the threshold. But, you mentioned the ESOP portion. Now, from what I understand, the deferment of time of payment is currently available only to the DPIIT registered startups holding
Only to
IMB
IMB
certificates.
registered startups, which is roughly around 600.
Okay. But apparently, many startups don't get the IMB certificate soon because the procedure itself is slow. So, do you think the government also needs to do something there to fast track this procedure?
So
Because, I
that's
mean,
the IMB certification is required if you want a tax benefit. Now, ESOP is not a tax benefit, it's just a deferred point of payment, right? So, therefore, frankly, it doesn't make sense. But even if you have to have, we are saying just make it available for all DPIIT registered startups with guardrails. But if you have to keep it under IMB, then one, maybe have a different strategy for startups that are funded by what you call credible authorities or whatever. Or second, yes, you have to figure out a fast track process, but something has to happen in this space.
Right. Romal, I'm going to bring you here before I go to Keshav for the IT thing. Debjani also mentioned the harmonization of LTCG charged on shares of charged on shares of unlisted companies, and I think this has been a big ask for VC investors. They feel that they want parity with public market investors. Again, in your view, how will this help long term in bringing in more domestic capital? Because we are heavily dependent on foreign capital now when it comes to funding startups in India.
See, I think any kind of assistance to domestic and clarity, right? I think there are two things that are important. One is clarity of, for example, what is available, and second, any kind of assistance will always help. And today, what we're seeing is, as Debjani rightly mentioned, the view is that okay, all of these are getting funded. Right, but a lot of them actually are not getting funded. A lot of them are actually all domestic, and they are in different parts of the country as well, right? We are seeing a portion of those. So if we can expand that and give some clarity and give some assistance, then I think it would really help these startups.
Right. Keshav, let me come to you. Do you also believe that, the government needs to do more in terms of SEC policies to perhaps allow, work from home always as opposed to the current extensions? Because from what we understand, employees of IT units and SECs are allowed to completely work from home until December 31st. And then, Nasscom keeps going, making representations, and, they keep getting extensions for the sector. So do you believe more clarity is awaited? Because it's become pretty clear now that, there is going to be the sense of permanent hybrid workforce employees who will perhaps prefer coming in only once or twice a week. Getting them to do even that is becoming difficult. So do you think more needs to be done on that front?
Yeah, Chandra. So, the first thing is, the government has always been very supportive of the industry. So we are confident that, every time Nasscom goes back and Debjani knocks at the door of the government, that extension will anyway, happen. But I think now the stage has been reached where it is now clear that employees want to work in a particular manner. And therefore, if we want to, grow this business, recognizing the new international norms and how people want to behave, I think it makes sense for us to also create the ecosystem around some of these things, including SEZ. But why only SEZ? I think there is an opportunity now for the government to also look at things like, building the whole infrastructure, like I said, leveraging information technology as a tool for social development. Why don't we look at, actually create, high speed and, secure internet bandwidth available in all tier 2, tier 3, kind of locations to increase the productivity of remote workers. Why not the government now take that as a challenge to say that's the area we want to invest in. So people, need not actually be in offices, and, companies alone need not make that investment. Let people work from wherever they are. Right, and be productive in this model, and like you said, why not categorize certain components of the ITS industry as essential services, right? And put that into a long-term kind of note as opposed to every 2 or 3 months, right? So those are the kind of things I would recommend. Again, incentivize and the use of and adoption of like cloud services, technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence. Now, these are all the opportunities of India. So I think from a budget point of view, I don't know whether it's this budget, but over a period of time, the government, I think, should now saying, here is the opportunity for India. So let's now start creating the ecosystem for it. Let's start creating the policy, for it, after chatting with Nasscom and the others, and not just focus on the old side of our business. Because if we go to the old part of India's IT and BPM business, then we will still say there are steps to be taken, like the cash blockage that is lying there on the GST side, right? Because we don't get refunds of GST. Maybe that needs to get addressed, because if you're an exporting company, why do you need to have GST lying there? When there's an opportunity to do more with that working capital, right? So maybe that can be addressed. Then certification of each vendor invoice, for special economic zone, that can really be addressed. Similarly, the domestic sales to be allowed I think in INR, from SEZ. Why should it only be in US dollars or whatever? And similarly, the SEIS credit, can actually be extended instead of doing it, piecemeal. Why not just extend it? So these are the here and now suggestions, but I think we want to really focus much more on the bigger opportunity of India and how the government can play a part in creating that ecosystem for rapid growth of this business.
Also, just to add to that, Chandra, the SEC changes actually budget as it's not really a budget issue. And I think we are in very active discussion with the Commerce Ministry. A lot of it will be addressed to the Deshwell when that comes out. So, and I think there's some very, very good discussions and consultations going on. On the work from home, government has already given an approval for a year. I think at an industry, while we get that the model is hybrid, but return to work is becoming an extremely important imperative for us. So we are actually good with the 1 year extension. If things change, we will go back, and we've left that door open with government to have a discussion. But as of now, I think the 1 year is what we need, and it gives us and our clients the certainty that we have this available. To figure out what that hybrid model really looks like, with maybe higher focus on work from return to office than work from home. So these are things which are evolving, and we'll have to think it through.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Chandra,
sure. Go ahead.
Just to add, and I think both of them have raised this. The work from home, at least what we're seeing is also it has a significant impact on mental health. Right. So while I know it's the convenience is very much of working from home, but just working alone for long periods of time, I think that is a challenge. And really, it's good to get to people to some extent of working from home, working from office, and working from colleagues. And the second bit I also would like to add is, you can't lay fiber everywhere. You can, but it takes time. So how do you still use things like space tech, for example, to ensure that you can cover much broader areas across India?
Debjani, anything else you would like to add on the here and now suggestions that I referenced earlier for the IT sector?
Yeah, for the industry, I think we've given a list of 11 fixes that are needed, improvements that are needed. Is that your fire alarm going on? You're okay?
Not mine. Yeah, okay. Maybe the top 3-4 that come to your mind that are perhaps most
I'll give
important.
you a top 3 actually that I think are very important, and these are all small but extremely important changes. So first is just prescribing the binding timelines for disposal of appeals. There's such a huge backlog at the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals, the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, etc. Currently, it's recommendatory. So they've sort of recommended the timelines, but that honestly doesn't work. As of I think 31st March, there was something like 5 lakh plus cases pending. So what we are recommending is change it from recommendatory to prescribe binding timelines. I think this is going to have a huge impact on ease of doing business from the industry and save us time, money, everything, right? The second one, which is also important for our industry, is providing a specific time limit, and we are suggesting 4 years from the end of relevant financial year for completion of TDS proceedings under, I think it's section 201. Which is in relation to payments made to non-residents. This will again significantly help in removing ambiguity, avoid unnecessary and long-drawn litigations. I mean, currently, there is no time limit that has been specified, and therefore TDS returns are scrutinized, for whenever they want to, and for past years without any kind of limit. And this just makes it extremely an uncertain environment for our industry. And then another easy intervention, low-hanging intervention is, there's a provision for deduction of incentivizing businesses to employ additional employees when we create jobs. Now, threshold was finalized, if I'm not wrong, in some Finance Act in 2016, and it was finalized as 25,000. And a lot has happened. Salaries have moved up, cost of living has moved up. So that 25,000 threshold, at least for our tech industry, which employs knowledge workers, does not make sense. Even at a basic level, our understanding is it needs to be around maybe 50,000 per month. And that again will tremendously help industry. So like this, we have around 11 such asks, which are really not new, but updating provisions which have become obsolete, or changing something so that it can become significantly effective in its implementation. I think those are the kind of asks we have put together. And last but not the least, Chandra, just, India is today the preferred destination for global capability centers. All the large companies are setting up their R&D in India. Though we have seen a tremendous acceleration in growth, we still have addressed less than 50% of the market. We have a huge opportunity to do more. And this is where the transfer pricing becomes extremely important. And again, three things under that, right? The advanced pricing agreements currently takes more than 4 years, which just does not make sense. I mean, how do we ensure that we can fast track and get this done in 6 months? Safe harbor rules. This is another one which we have to look at, because they prescribe a sort of minimum return margin related to third party transactions, which is just not relevant anymore. And what we are recommending is uh, completely re-looking at that and reducing it to reflect the realities of a global competitive market. I think this will make India way more attractive. And last but not the least is constitution of an alternate dispute resolution body. This is again very important, where we need to have a dispute resolution body with participation of industry as well as government. I think this will help significantly boost the India image as a preferred destination for R&D and GCCs. So I'll stop there.
Chandra,
Right.
can I just add two minor
Yes,
points
yes,
here?
please. Yes.
So, as you can see, Debjani has listed out a number of little tweaks, that are
Yeah.
actually required. And actually, somebody, if they pay the attention and tweak these things, we can actually grow much faster, I feel, because, the confidence increases even more, the liquidity increases even more. So in that vein, I just want to add two more things, simple things like, withholding tax complication. I think the simplification of withholding tax structure is now required, because many countries actually do not impose withholding tax obligations for domestic transactions. And now over the years, India has introduced a number of requirements on withholding tax, but by now everything is digitized, and we know, the government actually has all the information on the various players. So I think there is a need now to simplify, some of that, so that liquidity is, available to, the players. The second thing is the statutory timelines for issue of refunds, disposal of rectification, and orders giving effect to such proceedings also is required, because even after a kind of a order is issued, by the time refunds are really not forthcoming. So again, that will actually ease up quite a bit the liquidity for players. So I think that's one more here and now hygiene recommendation I would make. And then from a longer term India story point of view, I think this is the time to also start investing between industry and the government in creating cyber crime cells, which are conversant with local and international security standards and regulations for quick prosecution of cyber criminals. When an industry does well, you're always going to have these fly-by-night operators who come in and pretend they're part of this industry, right? And the only way you can handle them is where, in a structural fashion, the genuine industry players, government get together and actually create this ecosystem to manage some of this. So I think this is an area we should now be looking at, because India is going to be the leader in this area for the long term, and you are going to get a lot of fly-by-night operators. I mean, you're seeing that there are TV serials now on some of this. right? And we should now be dealing with it, in a very structured fashion.
Right. I'm not sure if this is something the government can do in the budget, but Romal, employment generation is a big talking point in India. So to that effect, should the government also perhaps incentivize companies more to open up in smaller cities? We've seen how this has worked so beautifully for Zoho in terms of the talent pipeline, setting up in Tenkasi, and how it's worked for them. How can we create more such Zohos from India's, small districts, small towns?
See, I think most of the IT companies are looking at tier two, tier three cities anyway. Question is, can the central and state, because a lot of it is also state government related, and if you look at attracting investments, as you said, if they can facilitate that, for example, buildings or land, or for example, in a record period of time, can you actually set up an operation? If some of those skilling, so in our engineering colleges, I think we've moved up a long way, but in terms of skilling, and especially for the new age technologies, like I said, embedded software is going to be pretty much there in every chip that is going to come in. That's going to be a big thing. So can India take a leap and invest in that kind of skilling? So if the government can do a few of those things, I think that will make a big difference to the tier two, tier three. But we're already seeing tier two, tier three having a lot of talent pool that is available, that is today probably in the cities, but also operations being set up in those tier two, tier three cities.
Right. With that, I'm actually going to get closing comments from Debjani. She had the first word. I'm going to let her have the last word as well. Debjani, what are you hopeful and fearful about when it comes to the union budget?
I really hope that the government seizes the opportunity to just strengthen the foundation and make those changes that they need to make to remove some of these roadblocks to accelerated growth, because I do believe our industry is at the cusp of accelerated growth. And this will be such a huge missed opportunity if we do not address that, because once again, we don't have any big ask as an industry. We do not ask for major tax rebates or benefits or incentives. We just want them to make it easier for us to do what we do, and to move faster, to be much more agile than what we are. So really hopeful that happens.
Great. On that note, Debjani, Keshav, as well as Romal, thank you very much for joining us on Money Control. And as Debjani said, let's hope for the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you.